Dinkins became the mayor of New York in January 1990, the New York Daily News celebrated his inauguration by reminding readers that there were 10 fresh murders kicking off the decade. Dinkins, who emphasized he would tackle crime through his Safe Streets, Safe City program, called the city not a melting pot, but a gorgeous mosaic. But the city was 28% black, and many of those residents thought the new mayor would be giving them special treatment. And if not special treatment, equity. This is despite the spillover of late 1980s events like the Central Park Five were unjustly found guilty of rape in 1990, and participants of Yusuf Hawkins' murder were acquitted. New York was in the midst of changing demographics, with 1.3 million people leaving the city during the decade and 1.2 million immigrants arriving at the same time. 43% of the city was white, the majority, but they were outnumbered by minorities in total. For the first 4 years of the decade, 33% of immigrants were from the Caribbean, 26% were Asian, approximately 20% were from the Dominican Republic, and 12% were South American, and 2% were African. There were also 66,000 people from the former Soviet Union. New immigrants do not simply replace old residents in the same jobs. Look at the way Italians shaped the construction industry, or more recently, how Koreans have changed green groceries, said an economist in 1991. They work longer hours and display their products in new ways. It's a different kind of business. The changing demographics and natures of businesses obviously impacted race relations. There were even tensions between Dominicans and Puerto Ricans because the latter group was no longer the dominant Hispanic minority. So in January 1990, a 46-year-old Haitian woman shopping at the Korean-owned family Red Apple produce store in Flatbush, Brooklyn, claimed one of the co-workers and his brother assaulted her. The brothers were arrested and released, sparking a boycott of the grocery and a store across the street, the Church Fruit and Vegetable. It was approximately the 6th boycott of Korean-owned markets since 1984, and participants, many of them Haitian and organized by Sonny Carson, voiced frustration with being taken advantage of by owners or being accused of stealing in Korean establishments. Said one man to the LA Times, "Can you imagine how it felt to be a black man shortchanged by a Korean cashier? Standing there at the front of the line with a shop full of disbelieving eyes on me, there was not a thing I could say to make her believe I was telling the truth. Nothing could wash me that day. I gave that Korean woman a $10 bill." Though the boycott threatened the grocery, the landlord waived the family Red Apple's rent, and the Korean American Community Association held the store down, providing it with approximately $8,000 a month to stay afloat. A spokesman from the Community Association said, "Korean merchants have decided that his store should be a test case against the black-sponsored boycotts. If we close, then what next? Flatbush, Pennsylvania, Utica?" The boycott highlighted ongoing tensions nationally between black people and other minorities, buying property and selling necessities in their communities. Noted a Brooklyn pastor, "There are a lot of black people you pass on the streets who have been dreaming for years about opening up businesses in some of those boarded up buildings. They are systematically denied access to insurances and capital and denied access." Not everyone supported the boycott though. One black man gave the owner an envelope with $100 and an apology note, and others intentionally crossed the picket to shop. A Brooklyn teacher named Fred McCrae at Erasmus Hall High School led his class of 30 students on a field trip to break the boycott and shop. He immediately faced backlash from parents, and he ended up requesting a transfer to another school, saying his life and the lives of his family had been threatened. Parents demanded he resign, and even dragged up his past criminal record, forcing him to go public on the Joan Rivers show about his 2-year prison stint for drug possession in the 1970s. There were other anti-boycotters though, said one 66-year-old. "I've been threatened, called Aunt Jemima and all that. Sometimes they follow me a block and a half threatening me. The Koreans never gave me any problem. I have more trouble with my own people." However, a Korean professor of sociology conducted a study in 1992 and found that 61% of Korean merchants in black neighborhoods believe that black people are generally less intelligent than white people, while nearly 70% believed that black people are more criminally oriented than white people. These were the troubling racial dynamics of the 90s. In May 1990, it was reported that up to 15 black Brooklyn teenagers attacked 3 Vietnamese men, believing them to be Korean and yelling slurs. Said the co-chairperson for the Committee Against Anti-Asian Violence, "The struggle in Flatbush is what happens when you take out government money directed to the lower income classes and force them to live next to one another on the edge of survival. It kills me to see ourselves pitted like this against African Americans." 8 months into the boycott, David Dinkins came and bought vegetables from the store to ease racial tensions, prompting backlash from those who said he should have went sooner and those who thought he shouldn't have went at all. The church Fruit and Vegetable hired a black employee in an attempt to quell the boycott, but it wasn't officially over until 16 months after it began. The family Red Apple owner sold the store to another Korean man, and 3 days later it was back to business as usual. The men accused of assault were found not guilty. Commentary by a black journalist in an article titled "When Boycotts Were for Just Causes" revealed a possible xenophobia of Haitian immigrants. Wrote a black woman named Cheryl McCarthy. The woman was exposed as a liar and threatened to return to Haiti since she said she could get no justice in this country. Good riddance. Less than 3 months after the boycott ended, on August 19, 1991, 7-year-old Gavin Cato, the son of Guyanese immigrants, was playing outside with friends in the Crown Heights neighborhood of Brooklyn. A Hasidic man named Yosef Lish, in a funeral procession and zooming through a red light, hit another car and knocked over a 600-pound stone pillar that pinned down Gavin and his cousin Angela. Gavin died nearly instantly. Yosef was allegedly pulled from the car and beaten, and a Jewish ambulance service removed him from the scene for transport to a hospital, leaving Gavin and Angela to wait for medics.
Residents were angered because the driver was questioned, but so far not charged with any crime. And because the more seriously hurt children were apparently ignored by Hasidic private ambulance volunteers who arrived ahead of a city ambulance crew.
Their medical attention was not the same medical attention that the Jewish gentleman got. You understand what I'm saying? They helped him before they helped the children. And the children were the victims, not him.
Hasidic residents, meanwhile, were angered by what they said was the revenge killing later of a Jewish man.
What was an accident which other people used as an excuse to murder one member of our community, at 2 hours later.
They didn't take care of the children. They leave the children on the ground and take care of the drivers and the passengers from the car.
The trauma of the event immediately gave way to a riot, with residents and non-residents gathering to throw bottles and rocks. A passing Jewish man, Yankel Rosenbaum, was beaten by up to 20 black men before being fatally stabbed to death by a Trinidadian man named Limerick Nelson. When Dinkins and Police Commissioner Lee Brown went to calm the situation down, they were virtually ignored, and Dinkins was even booed. Other Jewish people were injured, stores were looted, and property was damaged. By the third day of rioting, Al Sharpton led a march while over 1,800 cops were dispatched to Crown Heights. "If the Jews want to get it on, tell them to pin their yarmulkes back and come over to my house," demanded Sharpton, who had just survived being stabbed in the chest in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn the year before.
And in revenge, 29-year-old Yankel Rosenbaum was stabbed to death. The funeral for the Jewish student was held today. 2 people have been charged with his murder. Tonight, the students wanted to know why the driver who hit the children was not arrested. The mayor explained that the evidence is being presented to a grand jury.
I'm not able to go out there and say this man was driving this car is going to be arrested tonight. I can't say that.
As the mayor spoke, the chaos continued outside. At least 15 officers were injured in skirmishes in the streets. The windows of a police van were smashed. The mayor was going to walk the streets, but in the end decided against it. Instead, he spoke to a crowd from the school steps and was booed. After the mayor left, I spoke to some teenagers who live in Crown Heights.
If they arrested a Jew that did it for like that, then everybody would have been happy.
Black people were pissed at Jewish people benefiting from white supremacy as much as they were about Gavin Cato's death. And Jewish people were alarmed and rightfully angry about how acts of anti-Semitism by black people were underreported during the riots. A jury of 10 black, 8 white, and 5 Latino jurors declined to indict Yosef Lish, who later moved to Israel. Meanwhile, Limerick Nelson was acquitted of Rosenbaum's murder, though he was later found guilty of violating Rosenbaum's civil rights. The boycotts, along with the Crown Heights riots, would be key lightning rods for mayoral hopeful Rudy Giuliani. On September 16, 1992, Giuliani joined thousands of drunk cops outside of City Hall, hurling epithets with racial signs, goading them on with a microphone. Why were these drunken cops rioting? They were pissed about a bill that Dinkins was pushing that would make the Civilian Complaint Review Board all civilian instead of half cop. While Dinkins had hired more police, He also wanted a better system for holding them accountable. Back in July, a cop named Michael O'Keefe had shot and killed an undocumented Dominican immigrant and bodega clerk named Jose Kiko Garcia, which caused 3 nights of protests in Washington Heights. The press would focus on Garcia's drug charge, and cops bristled after Dinkins invited his family to Gracie Mansion, the mayor's place of residence. O'Keefe was ultimately cleared of any wrongdoing and lauded as a hero during the cop riot. The permit that these cops had expressly covered the area outside of the Murray Street Irish pubs and cop bars. When they weren't allowed in City Hall, the approximately 4,000 to 10,000 cops turned and walked a few hundred feet to Brooklyn Bridge. A dozen mounted on-duty officers did nothing as they crowded the bridge. Only 2 officers were ever suspended for their role in this riot. Complained Dinkins, some of them out there were calling out nigger. Why would the people in our communities have the confidence in them that they would have the sensitivity to handle a tense situation in the minority community? 5 New York Times reporters said that they didn't hear slurs at the protests, which was disputed by a Channel 2 cameraman and other witnesses. Dinkins was further spun as anti-cop. Giuliani, who was once more libertarian-leaning, used his new pro-cop credibility to bolster his campaign. Not only did Giuliani champion a return to safe parks and events by calling for more policing and imprisonment, but he advocated for more metal detectors and cops in schools. Giuliani astutely zeroed in on minorities upset with Dinkins, clinching a Jewish vote by referring to the 1992 Crown Heights riots as a pogrom, or an organized massacre of a group of people, and appealed to Korean Americans and business owners in the wake of the family Red Apple boycott. Giuliani also managed to scrape 1/3 of the Latino vote. When election time rolled around, Rudy hired off-duty cops, firemen, and correctional officers to monitor black election districts for voting fraud, while Commissioner Kelly assigned 52 captains and 3,500 officers to police polling places, both tactics effectively scaring some voters from participating. But also, black voters weren't all that excited about voting for Dinkins, who many believed hadn't prioritized black needs. Only half of the city's 3.3 million registered voters participated, and 50.9% chose Giuliani in an extremely tight race. Upon his election, Giuliani announced a quality of life campaign. He made Bill Bratton, an advocate of the broken windows theory, the new police chief. A 1994 NYPD memo outlined Police Strategy Number 5, or reclaiming the public spaces of New York. Misdemeanor arrests rose by 50%, and police misconduct incidents rose. The idea was to go after low-level quality of life crimes like graffiti, turnstile jumping, loud music, and panhandling by doing more ticketing and aggressive policing via random stop and frisking. Even black Deputy Mayor Rudy Washington was stopped and frisked by police. Clearly, these small quality of life policing policies had a bigger impact. Squeegee men had been a campaign issue that Giuliani called menacing and extorting. Under Dinkins, a flawed study of less than 50 men who made a living by cleaning car windows misrepresented the problem. Giuliani proposed a policy of zero-tolerance police enforcement based on an April 1992 Department of Transportation rule that prohibited people from washing windshields or selling things to car drivers. It thus gave New York City cops the power to arrest squeegee men, even though the DOT did not advise outright policing. In 1998, an off-duty cop named Michael Meyer shot a squeegee man named Antoine Reed in the chest and claimed self-defense. Reed survived, but with serious injuries, and Meyer was acquitted in a non-jury trial. Said the then Bronx District Attorney Robert T. Johnson, Antoine Reed's crime is one that has continually been referred to as a quality of life crime. If somebody can be shot down for a quality of life crime, what does that mean for the rest of us? Despite the fact that crime rates had fallen under David Dinkins through his Safe Streets, Safe Cities program, all categories of violent crime made consecutive declines during the last 36 months of Dinkins' term, ending a 30-year upward spiral, Giuliani would receive the credit. Rudy lobbied the state legislature for a return of the death penalty and an end of parole, enacted drug and gun-free zones around schools by increasing police traffic in those areas, and called for arresting more drug dealers. While Giuliani targeted drug dealers, the poverty that led led to drug dealing went largely unaddressed and was made worse due to negligence and corruption. Quality employment, affordable housing, and aid from the non-private sector was hard to find. By the end of Giuliani's second term, 1 in 4 New Yorkers was living in poverty, the same rate as the 1989 to 1992 recession, and they were disproportionately black and people of color. In 1994, 27% of the applicants to welfare were rejected, and 5 years later, 75% of job center applicants and 52% of welfare applicants were denied. Many were forced to join the work experience program, which were horribly paid manual labor positions that provided cheap labor for the city in exchange for meager welfare. The food stamp roll shrunk by 35%. Giuliani also appointed racist pedophile Russell Harding to the head of the New York City Housing and Development Corporation, which was supposed to give low-interest loans for construction of low-income housing. Instead, Harding embezzled over $400,000, spending some of it on a sex tour to Thailand. Black people's realities in the city made big news during the second half of the 90s, especially because crime filled the city coffers. Take, for example, the fact that in 1994, there were 720 people arrested for misdemeanor marijuana offenses. By 2001, it was 60,000 arrests per year. The cops doing the arresting were mostly young white males from the suburbs of Long Island and Queens, with little or no college experience. Not living within the city, they were expected to police. On August 9th, 1997, Abner Louima, a Haitian immigrant, was leaving Club Rendezvous in East Flatbush when he was wrongfully arrested, beaten, taken to the 70th precinct, and sexually assaulted with a broom handle in a bathroom by Justin Volt. Those inside the precinct ignored this vicious act. Louima was admitted to the hospital due to his injuries only after a Haitian nurse took him seriously and told everyone. Protests raged by August 16th, and Volt tried to claim that Louima must have had gay sex at a club, which was disputed by a coworker he had bragged to about the assault. Volt was given 30 years in 1999 after pleading guilty to numerous charges of assault and conspiracy.
Each officer who was inside the precinct on the day that this event took place should also be brought up on criminal charges and at a minimum administrative charges.
A plea of conspiracy without naming the co-conspirators is an incomplete plea. We feel he should name them, and that all of them ought to be remanded today.
One other officer named Charles Schwartz was eventually punished for perjury. Abner Louima would sue the police department, winning $8.7 million in damages. $1.6 million of that money came from police unions. The next tragic scandal came on February 4th, 1999, when Guinean immigrant Amadou Diallo was shot 41 times by 4 undercover officers, guided by Giuliani's pride and joy, Compstat. The brass defended the cops, who had been looking for a rape suspect, and initially declined to prosecute. There were 2 weeks of protests led by former Mayor Dinkins, Jesse Jackson, and an array of leftist and liberal New Yorkers, plus Latinos who detested the 1995 police murders of Puerto Rican men Anthony Rosario and Hilton Vega. 4 black and 8 white jurors would acquit all 4 officers of shooting Diallo, and the city eventually paid $3 million to his parents.
We the jury. That's why they didn't have it in the Bronx. They're giving cops license to kill now.
Because we know they made a statement today that this could ever happen. That what they did to Amadou Diallo, that they could do to any Puerto Rican, Dominican, black brother out here, and sisters as well. They made that statement. They made it clear to us.